Hello again. Tonight is January 31st, 2015, which means tomorrow is Super Bowl Sunday.
And your birthday.
Which means our New England Patriots are going to play the Seattle Seahawks. And as we used to say where I grew up, dude, the Pats are in the Super Bowl. We're going all the way. But we're in Texas now, so I don't talk like that anymore. I'm going to show you how to cook a 14-pound brisket that we have on my Weber Smoky Mountain. And we're going to have a really nice menu for tomorrow night, consisting of cornbread, maybe some mac and cheese, some fresh vegetables. And the reason why I'm starting late tonight is because we're going to cook the brisket for about an hour a pound. It's going to cook at 225 degrees until we reach an internal temperature of 195 Fahrenheit. So we'll be going on the grill tonight at around midnight, expecting it to come off the smoker tomorrow around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to let it rest for at least an hour, which means we won't be eating it any earlier than 3 o'clock. So that's the plan. Let's check out, see what we've got. So here we have a 14-pound bad boy. We're going to trim it up a little bit because when you buy a brisket like this from the store, it comes with a lot of fat on it, and some of the fat is not going to render during the cooking process, so we're going to cut it off. There's you can tell the kind of fat you want to cut off because it's very thick and dense, almost like plastic. And there's a section of it here we're going to take off, a section on the back here that we're going to take off, and we flip it over and we look at the fat cap. This piece all right here, we're going to trim down till it's only about 1/4 of an inch thick. Everything else we're going to leave on. Some people really like to trim the snot out of these things, but I like some fat on it because fat tastes good, and it also helps the cooking process. So let's talk for a second about what a brisket is. It's a piece of beef that comes from the cow, and when you buy the Packer brisket, like I got and like you want for smoking, there's two important parts. There's the flat, which is the thinner, flatter part, obviously, and then there's the point, which is the bigger, rounder part. And the point sits on the cow up around here and goes down to the flat, down around, down the rib cage, down around the side. And the reason why it's not the greatest piece of beef in the world is because this part of your body, or a cow's body, gets a lot of work. Therefore, the beef tends to be a little bit tougher, which is why we're going to cook it so long and so slow. So if you cook it correctly, it comes out wonderfully. You just have to make sure that you don't rush the process. So we'll start with a good sharp knife, and this section here we're going to cut into it. And follow along the fat, and we'll just peel it back here. And watch it pull away as we trim it down. And we'll stop when we hit the meat. And then just cut across. Chunk of fat. Set that aside. We'll just keep trimming all the hard pieces. Sometimes you have little pieces hanging off, just whack those off too. how much do you trim? Well, it depends on what your tastes are. The common school of thought is to leave about 1/4 of an inch of fat. Some people like to trim it way down to the meat. Some people don't trim at all. It all depends on what your tastes are and what your cooking technique is. Well, we're going to cook this for a long time at a low heat. It's going to give the fat time to render. So we're just going to cut off just the thickest, nastiest parts that won't render in the process and leave the rest. It's easier to trim the fat when the meat's cold, so I don't let it warm up first. I take it right out of the fridge, trim it up, and then warm it up for about an hour on the counter, which is okay to do with beef. You don't want to do that with other kinds of meat, like poultry or pork. And that's pretty much all we're going to do for the trimming. You can see that there's some silver skin on this side, but not much, not enough to worry about, so we're just going to leave it. And the fat that's left is this much softer, very flexible fat. You can tell because you can bend that fat nicely. The other stuff is too thick to bend. And this is the stuff that's going to render, and it's going to tenderize the meat from the inside. And you can see, too, on the side, I have some nice marbling. And that's a good sign that there's good fat content in here. And we're going to get a nice juicy piece of meat when we're done. So let's talk about the rub. It's a very simple rub that a lot of folks like to use with brisket, particularly a fella named Aaron Franklin who owns Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas, and he is a barbecue superstar, famed of song and story, known the nation and perhaps the world over as the king of barbecue, and he recommends a 50% black pepper, 50% salt rub. So we'll take his suggestion and we'll do that. So here's our very simple 2-ingredient rub. And we're not going to go too heavy. This is going to be a nice savory piece of meat because we're cooking it so slow. So we'll take it easy on the rub and just go around the outside. Oh, excuse me, black pepper in my nose. And the salt and the peppers tend to separate, so you gotta keep mixing it as you go. Keep it from getting clumpy in there. So there's a nicely rubbed brisket, ready to go. We're just going to let it warm up for a little bit because we have to spend some time preparing the smoker and getting it ready. It's a bit dark out here on my front porch, so we're doing the best I can with the lighting that I have. I just started the chimney with the briquettes in it. We have a full load of briquettes in the smoker. Since we're going to have to go 14 hours, we loaded it up to the gills. So we'll do a nice slow burn, and as soon as the fire is ready, we'll put the brisket on and I'll show you what that looks like. Well, forgive the darkness. I'm doing the best with the light that I have. I have only a headlamp right now. We have our fully stocked, ready to go smoker with briquettes. The chimney's all set with the burning briquette, so we'll get this thing going. And now I'll run inside and get the meat. We put the meat on fat cap up. Some people put it on fat side down. Very preferential. Really what you want to do. This thing barely fits on here, so we have to kind of scrunch it up a little bit, make some room. We put our probe in. And now we cover it up. The bottom air intakes are almost all closed. They're open maybe a quarter of the way. And the top vent is open all the way. We're going to regulate the heat using the bottom air intakes, and our target is 225 degrees. Everything's really cold right now, so we'll keep an eye on it as it warms up. It's going to take a little while to regulate the temperature and even it out for the first hour or so, but after that it should be good to go through the night. It's 10:30, so our brisket has been going now for 10 and a half hours. I woke up at 7 o'clock to check it, and it was running a little hot. The temperature of the smoker was at 275, but I closed down 2 of the air intakes and have one of them opened, just a sliver, and it settled in at 225, which is exactly what we liked. So I haven't yet hooked up the thermometer, figuring why should I do it early when I can do it 10 and a half hours into the cook and see where we stand with the temperature. So let's take a look and see how hot the meat is. Well, if this is to be believed, it says we're at 208 on the meat. So it looks like it cooked faster than we were expecting. Well, I don't know. Let's see what we got. It looks like $1,000,000. It has exactly the kind of texture that you want. It has that slightly gelatinous feel to it. The bark is a beautiful mahogany color. I don't think you could ask for much more than that. Well, if our thermometer says it's ready, it's ready. So we're going to wrap it up and take it off, and then we're going to keep it in a cooler. So we'll take the brisket off, wrap it up in a couple of layers of tin foil, then insulate it in a cooler where it will sit until it's ready to eat. You can rest a piece of meat like this from 1 to 4 hours, so we've got plenty of time. This one's a big fella. We don't want to break it in half here. So now it's just a waiting game. The brisket will be sitting, cooking the rest of the way in the cooler, and we'll get the rest of the dinner prepared in a little bit, and then we'll be ready to eat around 3 o'clock. So that's exactly what we're looking for. Perfect texture and color. Let's slice it up.
How's the poor thing eat? Probably soft food.
Suck it up.
Did you just see what I saw? Did you just watch the New England Patriots, led by Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, win the Super Bowl in a fashion that had to be seen to be believed? Huh. And it's good because it makes up for the brisket. I know, it's going to be a little tough to hear, but the brisket was overcooked. I attribute it to it taking less time to cook than I thought, so I put on smoker and went to bed and did them under the temperature as closely as I should have, and left it on too long, got a little too hot. But the flavor was really good, I'll say that, even though the meat was a little dry and it wasn't the color that I liked. When we cut into it, we ate just the flat. We left the point. And now, so many hours later, after the fact, I just cut into the point because I'm going to put it away and preserve it. But I wanted to show you something. Because there's really two different pieces of meat in the brisket, the flat and the point. The point being much thicker. It didn't overcook like the flat did, and we got a much better result. So take a look. You can see the color's really nice, the texture's really good, and there's plenty of meat now to have for all kinds of future meals. I'm going to take some for lunch tomorrow. I'm going to take it into work, and I'm going to gloat and brag to my friends about the Patriots winning Super Bowl 49.